All right, we're going to get started. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Tory Burch Foundation webinar on how to send emails that grow your business. I'm Gabrielle Raymond McGee, the Chief Operating Officer of the Tory Burch Foundation. And I'm here with the incredible Nicole Dalma. Nicole is the founder of the Fawn Group. She's also one of the leading experts in email marketing, and we're so fortunate to have her joining us today. Nicole has led email and data programs for companies like J.Crew, Condé Nast, Getty. She's consulted for some of my favorite companies, Sesame Street, always a great one, James Beard Foundation, LVMH. So we are in excellent hands with who I consider to be the top expert on email. And not only is Nicole brilliant on email, she's also leading critical efforts for our planet through her advocacy to go plastic free. Nicole and I actually met through our shared love for the ocean many years ago. And in the midst of COVID, Nicole launched her own online business called Mind Offline. And the whole purpose of Mind Offline is to support artisans and help families really disconnect from digital and spend time together. So that's something I know we could all benefit from. So check out Mind Offline. And Nicole, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm so excited to share a little bit of email knowledge with you.
Well, Nicole, I know that you understand the challenges and opportunities of what it takes to launch your own business. You're actually in the midst of launching your first boutique today. So thank you for carving out time in the midst of this grand opening. On top of all of your incredible professional experience, you're also a mom to two incredible little girls. So you really do it all. And we're so excited to learn from you today.
Oh, thank you so much, Gabrielle.
And the background already looks fabulous at Mind Offline.
Thank you. Thank you. We're still putting together the store downstairs, but I'm happy to be here. Great.
So Nicole, I know I always say that email is the killer app because it's in everyone's pocket on these little mobile devices. And we are so excited to talk through the hacks that only you know to help drive revenue, response, and really get tactical guidance of how to grow email list. So you're going to walk us through your presentation in just a bit. I know I see folks asking if we'll have time for questions, and absolutely at the end of Nicole's presentation, we'll have time for a Q&A. So drop your questions in the Q&A box below. Also know we're going to be distributing Nicole's slides at the end of this presentation. So be on the lookout for that. Don't forget to snap your photo of yourself during today's webinar and tag at Tory Burch Foundation for a chance to be featured on our Instagram, and let us know where you're tuning in from. So Nicole, we have a lot to get through, so over to you.
Thank you, Gabrielle. So I'm going to go ahead and share. Here we go. Can everybody see? Look good?
We can see. Thanks, Nicole.
Fantastic. So first of all, don't be intimidated. Not every single slide is going to have this much content on it, although I am a woman of many words, I guess you would say. But at the high level, I just really want to talk about email marketing because it has evolved so much in the last couple of decades, and it remains a remarkably powerful lever for marketers. And even since the early days in batch and blast sends, and of course, emails become much more sophisticated science, really, and there's all kinds of new platforms and automation. But there still is quite a bit that we don't understand about email. And I talk to many people that are also experts in the field, and I'm learning constantly as well. You really have to think a lot about what your email program is designed to do for you. At the core, conversions, and so sales or downloads or audience development, customer service, branding, of course, mission building, and visual storytelling are just a few of the core functions email supports. And oftentimes you have to choose priorities between those. And the last I checked, I think there's over 450 different email marketing platforms to choose from. They all use different naming conventions. We run into some platforms that call a template one thing, others that call it campaign. So it can get very confusing very quickly. And I'm well aware of that as someone that literally talks about email every single day. So if you're not deep inside the email marketing industry day to day, it can feel very overwhelming. And so my goal today is to really kind of break it down and share with you some of the things that I wish I had known going into it, areas that I might have overcomplicated inadvertently, shortcuts, and to use your term, hacks, really. So to get through email marketing and still feel good at the end of, especially this holiday season. So I want to chat a little bit about the nature of email. This is something that you won't find in most presentations and most best practices documentation, because it really comes from my personal observations. Email is one of the most talked about and least understood channels in digital marketing. I meet so many people that have advice on email or have a strong opinion on email, and oftentimes it's not rooted in the factors that really can contribute to your success. In my opinion, email is about statistics, common sense, and psychology. We're all pretty familiar with common sense and psychology. Statistics, that's a little stickier. I actually changed my major in college away from psychology to avoid statistics, and then went back to grad school for it once I got deeper into email, because I realized how critical it was to actually know which numbers you were looking at and whether or not they were the correct numbers to be informing your next steps. Thankfully, these days, there's all kinds of great tools on the internet where you can look up statistical significance. And, that's definitely one hack that I use. Instead of using complex, calculations, you can literally just enter your data on a number of sites and they'll tell you whether your results are statistically significant, meaning you have enough confidence to make a big business decision on those results. But just jumping a little bit further, it is true, in my opinion, that email can make or break. That's not intended to put too much pressure on you for your email. I think that it is important, though, to realize that if you're doing well in the email channel, it will inevitably have a very high ROI for your business. The DMA usually reports that the return, so every dollar that you spend on email, you will earn between $40 and $46 back, of course, on average. And that compares to other channels like social, where you might earn $4 to $6 back on a good day. Email is also very prime for critique. Expect a lot of feedback. I can remember at one corporate position I held, that feedback came over the loudspeaker from the CEO every morning as to whether he felt like the content was good or the content was bad. And I also get feedback from my mom, from my sister-in-law. So and you'll hear from your customers for sure. They'll write you back directly about your email. So just be prepared for that and really let your testing and your data and your intention with your brand help steer the course. You're in business for yourself for a reason. Remind yourself of that, and try to maintain a thick skin when it comes to the critique. But of course, be willing to listen to the critique if it is related to customer service, or if it's related to usability of your program or the clarity of your messaging. Closely related to that is the fact that email is emotional. People still really perceive their inbox as a sacred place. And while we do tolerate quite a number of emails coming in, because we do sign up, especially this time of year, a lot of us sign up for deals and perks that we'll get during the holiday season. If you miss, people can have a really strong reaction. And again, they'll write into you, or worse, they won't write into you and they will just stop engaging with your email. So that's sort of like the silent unsubscribe. Most of the people that stop engaging with your email actually don't hit unsubscribe or even hit spam. They'll just sit on your list and become disengaged, which is something we'll touch on because that's also a risk to your program. And finally, email is very delicate. Unlike social, where you could delete something, you can edit it, and you can generally pull back or tweak. Once it's out there, there's not a lot that you can change on email. And the general best practices abound. There's these nuances that come down to segmentation, relevance, and delivery, and they really require special attention. And there's just a few key things that we'll talk about, because email, while it's very easy to send an email, there's a lot of little things that can actually really hurt your overall email program and then subsequently impact your performance. So I like to think of myself as a pragmatic email marketer, meaning that I try to be very practical. That comes down to a lot of, rigorous prioritization and honesty with yourself about your resources and what it is that you really want to prioritize for the program. I work with brands, and myself having had a brand, ironically for my email consulting business, I never sent out a newsletter. And it was actually because the information that I was getting was coming in so rapidly that I almost didn't feel like it was something that I could keep up with. So I always just stayed, true to myself and felt like if I can't do best in class, that's not a path I'm going to explore. Whereas for my new business, I realized it was important to connect with my new customers and started sending emails almost immediately. So if you can be honest with yourself about what it is you want from email, I think that, when we start a brand, it's very easy, and this is true of small brands and some very large brands I work with, to want to have popular emails that look beautiful, that people talk about. But at the end of the day, I think most of us want emails that support our business and will allow us to stay entrepreneurial. So I think it's important to kind of balance there. Very often the emails that get the greatest response and the greatest engagement from an editorial and content standpoint are not the ones that are going to drive the most sales. And so you have to sort of determine what the balance is, and ultimately what you want, you to say in your email, and what if that reflects how you feel about your brand and the relationship that you want to have with your customers. That being said, the most common mistakes I see in email are over or under investing in the channel. Just simply throwing money at an email challenge is typically not going to solve it if you don't also have the resources in place to follow through. You can get started and have a really solid email program with a very basic email service provider, which I'll refer to as an ESP. So be very cautious, and if anything, try to put some rough calculations into place as to what you can actually reasonably expect back from the email channel. And that should help you set your budget. So how quickly are you growing emails? How many different products or services do you have on your website? What's your average order value? So understanding kind of the basics about your business. In absence of that, if you're just getting started, like I was with Mind Offline, I actually chose the least expensive channel that was already built into my e-commerce platform, because I really didn't know how much e-commerce was going to matter to my brand and how much I wanted to focus on it. And then the second most common mistake that I tend to see is trying to scale before you have the key foundations. It's so tempting to want to have a big email list and a big email program. And there's been, plenty of news that's fueled this, where large email lists are considered to be something that you should aspire to get to. But I can tell you firsthand that the size of your list is not directly going to correlate with your performance. And a lot of the best brands that I'm working with that are really nailing it in the email channel have much more conservatively sized lists than you might think. So talking about email foundations, these are the main areas that I want to cover today, because again, these are the areas that I wish people asked me about more frequently. Definitely get a lot of questions about platform and infrastructure. And I sort of want to talk about how I approach that decision-making process. We're going to talk about what I call a creative efficiency. It's really fun and easy to get hung up on the creative, but it's also important to be able to make decisions quickly. And so I'll talk a little bit about how establishing your brand visual identity and then sticking with it in terms of your templates and your creative patterns is going to help you get things out the door a lot more quickly. And also talk a little bit about what you can actually expect from the tweaking of your creative. The third thing we're going to talk about is KPIs. So if you are familiar with this term, I apologize. When I first got into marketing, I was not, and it was used about 50 times a day. I was working in a database team for a magazine publisher and quickly became familiar, with the term key performance indicators. It can mean a very different thing depending on what vertical you're in. But for the most part, when we're talking about email, those key performance indicators are going to be your open rate, your click-through rate, which are important, but not always that important, depending on what it is you're selling. And then I like to focus on other key performance indicators, that are really based on the conversion and the revenue and the factors that are going to actually drive your business and earn you off of the channel. 4, we'll talk about some of the skills you should consider as you're getting prepared to run your own email program, or possibly partner and bring on some part-time help to resource your email program, where you might want to gain training and seek out additional content. So great job being here today, because you're hopefully going to add at least some skill just by attending. And then the 5th is probably the least exciting, but the most critical, which is data hygiene, which sounds intimidating as a term, but really talks about the quality of the list that you have, and just how connected the people that are on your list are with your brand and with the emails that you're sending, and how important that is to actually guaranteeing that your emails make it in the inbox and they don't end up in the junk folder, or worse, get blocked, which is unfortunately happening to a lot of companies, big and small, right now, just as we head into the critical Black Friday season. So as I touched on earlier, just talking quickly about this tip, success in the email really comes down to rigorous prioritization. The companies that I see struggle with it of all sizes are trying to do everything at once. I tried to put these in order of what I think is critical. Obviously, you need to get on a platform, and don't belabor too much all of the different details around your templates and everything until you've at least figured out which platform you're going to be in and headed up that implementation. And then the second is, really quickly determine what your audience wants and needs. They're giving you so much data and feedback that you just couldn't get even if you had a store and you talked to every single customer that came in. We can deduce what they're opening, what they're clicking on, what's ultimately they're converting on, and then hopefully you can also see everything that's happening on your site after they've engaged with your email. So look at that very, very quickly and then determine what the best creative approach is based on that. So platform infrastructure, and again, that the common term ESP, email service provider, many of the providers, there's several hundred, as I mentioned today, we'll use other terms, the multidisciplinary marketing platform, marketing hub. It borders oftentimes on CRM. ESPs and CRM can be confusing. I still call it an ESP because to me, it's ultimately the platform that I'll deploy the emails off of, which essentially means that there's an interface where you're going to be able to set up your emails, upload your content, load your list and manage your list and segmentation, and then deploy off of the IP addresses that are either shared with other companies that you're pooling your volume together to deploy, or you'll have a dedicated IP. And you can think of your IP as almost the social security number for you. It's associated with a score and a credit score in your identity. And so that is kind of at the root of what an email service provider does for you. They offer a broad variety of services, but most of them have some core basic functions. I think that my recommendation is not to think so far ahead that this is what we're going to want to do in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Really try to focus on what you need to do and what you plan to do in the next 365 days, because those of you that have been in business for a while, any of us that have been in business during COVID know that priorities change, needs change. And it can be difficult to plan out an email program that far in advance. So if you can get the best tool for what you need right now and in the next 6 to 12 months, that's really the best tool for you to go with. And that will also help to keep you in budget. And hopefully you choose a platform with enough flexibility that you can modify your relationship with it if you do grow or you change the integrations that you need. And I do think that while migration is never a fun thing to go through, it's also is an investment of time, but it's never been easier. I migrated pretty large brands with 53 different territories in like 6 weeks, whereas I could say 5 years ago that would take 6 months easily. And a lot of that comes down to the tools that are available to us to manage data hygiene and segmentation and the best practices to get a new ESP whitelisted, essentially to clear that IP address for you so that you can start sending volume. This is another tip that I often share with my clients that I wish that more people had told me. You'll never hear it from the sales team that is trying to get you onto their platform, because their belief and what they've seen proven is that you will ultimately perform better if you fully adopt use of their program. But do not expect immediate results from a new program or from a new platform. There are inherent technical things that happen behind the scenes that similar, again, going back to that sort of credit score mentality, your sender score has to be reestablished. So even if you've been in business for 10 or 15 years, when you migrate, with very rare, few exceptions, sometimes you can take your IP addresses with you, but usually you start on a new IP, which is like a new social security number. You're going to start with new subdomains in many cases. And so you have to reestablish all of this behavior with what are called the ISPs, the AOLs, Gmails, Yahoos, and Outlooks of the world, for them to say, okay, this is not a spammer, I'm going to let your messages through. And so if you do plan to migrate, don't typically do it right before a big holiday season or another key moment for your company, because there's inevitably a little bit of a dip that happens before you start to see the return on that new technology. So this is my checklist of the 10 considerations that I like to prioritize. There certainly may be others that are very important to your business that are not on this list. But if you're going through the exercise of trying to choose a platform right now, or even evaluating what a good fit your platform is for you, these are the 10 things that I suggest considering, and I'll walk you through them in terms of what each of them means to me and what they might mean to you. So reporting, we talked earlier about data and the ability to actually see the KPIs, which we'll talk about, easily and readily. So this is very important for any business, and you have to be really comfortable with the nature of the reporting and make sure that the reporting meets your needs in terms of understanding exactly what business actions and what customer actions are taking place as a result of the email channel. Some of those actions will happen directly as click-throughs when they receive the email and they click through and hopefully take an action on your site. Some of those actions are a little bit more indirect, and so you have to work through attribution. We all have the experience of receiving an email on our cell phone, and then we very quickly go to the website, especially if it's a timely sale or code. And so we actually complete the transaction either immediately or within the next 24 to 48 hours, generally inspired by the email to do so, but you have to determine a way that you can actually track that back. And certain platforms are better than that at others. And certain reporting platforms are also a lot more customizable so that you can configure the reports that you want to see and the dashboards you want to see. Knowing how comfortable you are with data and working with raw data is very important there. Having come from the database background, I'm more comfortable working in large data sets, but with my clients in mind and knowing that they don't necessarily have the time or the bandwidth or the desire to export files and sift through Excel and create their own reports, I usually put reporting close to the top of the list. Second is culture. There is a variety of email cultures out there, from almost sense of humor, which you'll see with a brand like MailChimp, which really lightens the aspect of email, which can be sort of a chore for many businesses, to others that are very formal and are maybe a better fit for your business if that's sort of your approach. So spend some time with the sales reps and spend some time with the account managers and just see if you feel like you have a good connection, because ideally you're going to be working with these people quite a bit over the next several years if it ends up working out for you. So making sure that culture feels like a fit to you and they're understanding your business is very important. In terms of support, this is where the platforms really run the gamut, where it's very self-service and there's literally no phone number that you can call and there's no one you can get on the phone to get help. And they're pretty upfront about that. And they'll make up for it sometimes with really incredible documentation. But you have to understand what level of support that you're looking for. And if you want someone that you can get on the phone every day and handhold with you, or if you want to be a little bit more independent and you're okay, Googling things or searching through their documentation to figure things out. The pricing, again, this goes back to being able to put some reasonable estimate about how you think you're going to perform in email, what your expectations are for the channel. If it's primarily for newsletters that are not intended to cause any type of transaction or monetary motion from your customers, then you might want to be a little bit more conservative on your budget. Just focus on, great templates and the minimum that you need. And another factor is looking at the pricing structures and if they can be adjusted. Many of the especially smaller business ESPs are offering some really great options where you can prepay for a whole year and it's at a very low rate and those credits sort of stay in the account, or you can flex your account up and flex it down. Again, the smaller ones, it's typically a monthly commitment that you can adjust and cancel really at any time. And as you start to get more enterprise and you're seeing yourself reach lists and sending sizes of say 150,000 or more, they will start asking you for a contract. And many of them are asking for 2 years or 1 year, which can feel pretty daunting. And so, you want to think through whether that is a commitment you're willing to make, because that's a big investment. Checking out the templates. I'm a huge fan of the out of the box templates and, what's called a WYSIWYG, or, what's short for what you see is what you get. Just about every ESP has some pretty great templates, and I actually strongly recommend, especially for a small business, to find a way to make those work for you. You can do some customizations, and one of those reasons is efficiency, and the other reason is that the templates actually have solid code behind them, because poor code or sort of makeshift code that might look good initially is often going to break down once it tries to get through spam filters, or once it starts deploying onto different devices, different email clients. And so what might look great on your iPhone and your Gmail is not going to work out on Android or certain versions of Outlook. And most of the ESPs, and again, you can check this when you're researching them, their templates have been tested for that, and they're built to withstand all of the different changes that are happening on the platforms and the email clients, and they'll continue to adapt those templates to meet your needs so that you're not stuck with a beautiful template that suddenly broke because Microsoft recently did an update, which we're experiencing right now. And with that in mind, also, again, flexibility. So can you change your relationship with them? Can you configure it differently? If you want to change your e-commerce platform on the back end, how easy is that to do? That leads me into the integrations conversation. I know, Gabrielle, you had mentioned that integrations are, it's really short term for like plug and play. Like what can you just snap into? So if you're on Shopify and you really want to integrate with, MailChimp, take a look. Is there an easy plugin that you can do that? If there's not, then you may have to invest in development costs. So really dig into those things and know kind of like what your intended tech stack is before you make that decision. If you're not sure what your tech stack is, then I would probably choose an ESP that has a lot of integrations. And there's definitely 5 or 10 of them out there that have a ton of integrations. You could set up an entire store and business without having to even really work with any developer, that's going to save you a lot of time, a lot of headache, and a lot of money. And along that, look at the documentation. There's kind of 2 different approaches to documentation and plenty in between. A lot of the documentation is definitely written for developers. And if it feels like a foreign language to you and there's acronyms you've never heard of in there, that's probably a platform that's designed for more of a development community. And so it may be that could be a great platform. A lot of the really awesome platforms are built that way. And you just need to make sure that then you have a few hours of a development resource that you have access to, or you might find yourself really struggling just to do some basic things like setting up an automation or getting your emails from the people that signed up on your website actually piped into your email service provider. And then others are really designed for everyone. And the documentation is written in very clear language that makes it easy for any of us to get in there and just start sending email and setting up the templates. And then, quickly, just the last couple of points, talk to them about their clients, ask to see the case studies. If you are fortunate enough to be going through sort of the RFP or request for proposal process, which is, not always a privilege that a smaller business has, the best thing that I can say is put 2 real life scenarios in front of the person that's working with you to talk to you and try and sell you that platform, and have them walk you through how they would actually implement those things for your business. And if you get stuck there, that's a red flag, and it may take them some time to figure that out. But right out of the gate, if you know exactly what it is that you want to do and want to accomplish, let's see how it gets accomplished in that platform. And then, figure out from there if it feels like a good fit and it's going to be easy for you to do. The other thing to look at with clients is, if you really envy someone's email program and you like the way that things are not necessarily looking, but how they're deploying and the flow and the consistency of it, figure out what platform they're sending from. Oftentimes email service providers, it's almost like joining a sorority or fraternity. They can really connect you to other brands that might be good partners for your brand. That was probably more true when there was a lot more bigger conferences happening, which will happen again soon, I'm confident. But there are still a lot of virtual, connections. I can say for a lot of the big partnerships that I've done between brands and publishers or nonprofits, it was very often the ESP that made the introduction. And they have that ability to see at a bird's eye view all the different challenges that their clients are facing. So having a set of clients that you envy, or that you really like their program, or that you'd like to do business with, it's not a guarantee, but it's an important part of choosing a provider. And the last one here is the services. Some ESPs offer no services, so you're on your own. If you have a maternity or paternity leave and suddenly you're not able to send the emails out the door, or school's closed and your children come home, which we all experienced this year, is there someone within the business that's going to understand your account well enough to get in there and send and deploy those emails that are driving the weekly revenue for your business? If you get into a big deliverability challenge, is there someone that you can talk to that's going to walk you through and actually educate you on what happened and how you got into that problem? So the services is a big one, and I think that is something that there's a broad range there. So there's definitely some providers that make most of their money on the services, and they really pride themselves on hiring incredible consultants in-house. And then there's others that do a lot of outsourcing. I'd say a fair percentage of the work that we end up doing for Fawn Group, we end up getting connected through a vendor that maybe doesn't have a service, and it's a service that we offer.
So Nicole, this can you go back one slide?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is essentially your checklist for how you would go about picking an ESP, an email service provider. And for those starting out, because everyone wants to know who you recommend specifically, it sounds like for Mind Offline, which is your startup that's been open for a few months now, you're using Shopify. right? Because it was easy plug and play. There are, of course, so many, as you mentioned, MailChimp, Mandrill, I mean, Salesforce, there's so many out there. Do you have any other broad strokes recommendations for small business owners? Everyone's going to take this framework and use it as their checklist, but who else do you recommend, and how would you decide that?
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes I won't jump in with a recommendation because I'm really sensitive to the culture, and I know the culture of a lot of them, so that can be very important. But I will answer your question. I promise. So MailChimp is a great one for many brands, but if you want a lot of services, it's probably not a fit for you. Constant Contact, Campaign Monitor. There's a newer one called Klaviyo that's been great. As you start to advance a little more, there's a platform called Iterable that I just love working in. I still love working with SailThrough. So those are some of the brands that I would, if I start to work with a client and they tell me they're in one of those platforms, I'll say great. But there's Emma, Lean Plum. I mean, there really are. There's none that I would feel so strong, and of course I wouldn't say either that I would say don't go to. But I do think that there is like a moment of kind of connecting with, and oftentimes I won't make a recommendation even for an RFP for a client to evaluate a few until I've spent a little time working with them. Because the funniest thing I found that's true in email, that people tend to subscribe to things that aren't necessarily where their interests lie. I found that true in publishing and in music. They chose jazz and really they liked rap music, or things like that. Is also true actually in how we work. And I think it's maybe ask a friend or a colleague what they think your strengths are as well. I think of one client that I work with who's always telling me she's not very technical, and she is so brilliant and so technical, but it's just, her belief that or you'll hear someone say, oh, well, I just don't understand metrics, but then they drill down to them and they really do. So I think, being fair with what your skill sets and what your strengths are. And then of course there's also what you enjoy doing. Like if you are a real data nerd like I am, and you're going to be looking at the numbers all the time, you better make sure you're having a pleasant experience in that reporting UI. So but yeah, each of those ones that I mentioned, I have clients in each of them. I work with a best-selling author that also has a TV show and a lot of different things, and he happens to be on Constant or Campaign Monitor, and then I work with another one that's on Constant Contact, and I like working in each of them.
So it's important to assess where you are as a business owner, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and also, I know we'll talk about budget later on, but what's your budget? Because if you're working with an organization that has a ton of services, chances are they charge for that, right? So that's something to consider. But I know you have more to get through, so continue.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I wish I could tell you that there's just one that I would definitely go to, but I'd want to talk to you for a little bit first and get to know you. So creative efficiency, and this is when I can move through efficiently. In 20 years, I can honestly say that I've never once seen a template, just the template itself, dramatically improve email ROI. And I think that this is an important statement because templates are fun, and templates are the thing that most business owners gravitate to. I've worked with many clients that maybe I'll check in with them a few times a year, and we're not always working together consistently. And they're like, oh, and we got new templates, and we have new templates. And when I used to work in a magazine publisher, it was always new templates. A couple of things that can happen actually when you switch a template. Again, the filters don't recognize the code. The code has changed, and so you may actually see a dip in your return. But certainly if your template doesn't represent your brand well, there's an argument there for updating your template. So I think that's an important statement to make, that if your templates are generally functioning for all of the purposes that you need, you're able to measure, and people are actually able to access the content and navigate them, don't necessarily dramatically change them. You might update them a little bit. A second piece of creative efficiency comes down to testing. 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, every presentation I did and every conversation was about, testing. And what happened was this huge explosion of testing, and but people weren't really tracking the results, and they weren't moving towards a specific direction or proving out the hypotheses or assumptions that they might have, or hunches that they might have about their audiences. And there was also this big trend to do, especially on subject line testing, A/B testing. And I always, most subject line tests, with very few exceptions, get beyond like a 50%, 40% difference. And so let's say you're testing the color red versus blue in a subject line. So blue performs better. 46% of the list still would have rather gotten the red subject line. So if you keep evolving towards blue, are you really serving your audience? And so what I like to say is to test into the psychology of how your customer responds, tapping into sort of her emotional or his emotional touch points, and then guide your testing with the goal of learning more about him or her so that they can be segmented, so that you can understand who's a sale customer, who's a full price customer, who's risk averse, who's willing to take a lot of risk if you're in the financial sector. If you're just testing just to test and you're not actually documenting this and developing sort of rules around how your brand best communicates, then you might not be doing the most efficient, way of optimizing your creative. And especially if you have a smaller list, you might really be doing yourself a disservice, because again, going back to whether the results are statistically significant, if they're not statistically significant, I've seen brands make big decisions off of one or two subject line tests, and they're not looking down the funnel at what's actually selling, what's actually converting. And so we're going to talk about that a bit. But I think, again, if you are strapped in terms of creative resources, I'll touch on this a little bit later in terms of what I did for my brand. Really focus on, and if you can, if you're not a graphic designer, invest in having a brand guideline developed. Focus on the development of your logo, and sort of the components of that, what you want your Instagram to feel like, what you want your email templates to look like, and what the general color scheme, fonts, and that type of thing are. And once you have those in place, you'll be much more efficient just overall. You're not recreating those things every single time you develop a new email.
Nicole, can we just go back? So A/B testing, can you explain what that concept is? I know you're saying don't get wrapped up in A/B testing, but A/B testing is when you're sending out two different creative emails at once and seeing who responds, right? Is that
right? So there was, and I still do recommend testing, and I recommend, it's called A/B testing. Sometimes you'll do multiple tests. There'll be A, B, C, D. You'll test 4 different subject lines. So the slang term again, and this is just from years of using that term, so thanks for backing me up. The A/B testing is like, we're going to try subject line A against subject line B, whichever one does better, and maybe we'll test, say, 10% of our list. The remaining 80% are going to get the winning subject line. And that seems like a winning strategy, but it's not. And, because it may get you higher opens initially on that email, but again, a large portion of your list already told you that they would have preferred the other content. So it's sort of like if you walked into a retail store and they had red sweaters on one side and blue on the other side, and they were like, oh, but you don't want the red because most of our customers like blue. You'd be like, but I know what I like, and I already responded, and by opening, I told you what I liked. If I clicked, I told you even more. If I converted, you really know what I like, and you should be sending me content based on that rather than on what generally people like in your list. And I think that as you're small, and my email list for Mind Offline is in the low hundreds right now, so there is some room to do A/B testing. But I already have an idea of kind of the buckets of what I think. I've noticed, Mind Offline is again around offline activities and using your hands, and I've realized there's sort of the DIYs and the DIFMs, the do it for me's. And so as I start testing into my subject lines and looking at that, I already have sort of an idea in my head of what I want to test. So it's a really great question, and I don't want to discourage people from testing, but I very often see, especially early brands, that get really hung up on testing. And do they really feel like it's gotten them to a closer place where they understand their customer better? And that's ultimately what you're trying to do, is to understand how they vary from each other. As you get further along in your business and you have the budget or the resources, and there's a lot of vendors that can help you, you can start to look at the demographic information to see who she is. As you're smaller, not to feel too big brotherish, but I will actually look into my list and look at if I can find them on Facebook, and I'll try to understand who she really is, what her other interests are. And that's actually where you want to get with your email. And then eventually you'll be doing that in aggregate. Like, this is someone with children that's at home, or this is someone that's very busy in this role. This is someone that only likes to shop sale versus full price. These are the types of segmentation that you want to do, rather than just comparing 2 random combinations of words, which is a little interesting, I see.
Nicole, I love what you were sharing about Mind Offline, that you were so focused on getting the brand right, where you feel so confident in what the brand looks like, that any email template is easy to plug and play or tweak, as
Right,
opposed to not having the strong brand and then changing your email template every time you have
right.
a new thought. And I think that that lesson could save people a lot of money. Can you talk on that a little bit more?
Sure, sure. And I'll actually jump in. I could, I can jump ahead as well. I have slides on that if that makes sense too. Or I can sort of talk you through what that looks like. But I'll show you the examples at the end of the deck. But they're, the exercise of going through the branding. It was very efficient for me because I fortunately have someone that I've had like a 5 or 6 year relationship with that just is I swear she's psychic and able to get into my head, and I can just share with her a few of the things that I'm thinking. But collect some examples of brands that you would like your brand to be inspired by. Start thinking about the types of fonts and the feeling and the colors. And then either by yourself or with the support of friends and family, or if you're able to work with a graphic designer, that is one resource I do think it is worth investing in. There is just something, I know what I like graphically. Can I do it? No. And I think the first C I ever got was in graphic design when I went back to grad school. And yet I really appreciate great design. And when someone can put what's in your heart into a vision, it excites you as well. And so I now I'm very comfortable when someone asks me for my logo, or when I set up the templates, I know what the general color pattern is. And whenever, and I even love that, this deck is in the general kind of color, category of what our brand guidelines are. And you know this from Tory Burch, it's that there's an identity there, and it can start small, and then you can build off of that, and you can iterate with the seasons. But I do think that is something that you want to spend a lot of time with, and it doesn't need to be something that you labor, but that should be really fun. That is like one of the coolest parts about being an entrepreneur, is that it's yours, it's your vision. It's not meant to please anybody else but you. And if you're happy with it, you're going to like marketing better. You're going to like sending the emails out better, and you're going to be much more confident with the results.
And that is such a nice segue, because our webinar next week is on brand building. So I hope everyone signs up. But let's continue to get through your presentation, because there's such rich content here for all of us to learn.
Yeah, so I think we have covered some of the things up ahead, but just the final takeaway here. Everyone's always asking, what should I be doing in my emails? What's the best practice? Obviously, there's best practices around length of copy, images, that type of thing. But at the highest level, regardless of sector, I'm talking about, we're working with financial firms, we're working with companies that sell cars online, we're working with companies that sell shoes or handbags. The best emails right now that people are responding to, especially since COVID started, are honest, they're straightforward, and they speak in a relatable human voice. So with that, I'm going to jump into my love story that started during COVID, with this brand that I discovered on a website that supports a lot of different independent brands. And somehow I came across Conifer because there was, I think, a specific item that she happened to have on her smaller site. I love their emails, and it's not just that they're so clean and visually appealing, and that I can feel the emotion, and I can feel like the living and the lifestyle that's happening. But she was she was very specific, and always in her subject lines, which we'll talk about. She was super honest. What's so amazing about this woman that put together these emails, her earlier emails featured a beautiful model who she would hire to come over and be shot in her clothing. And then during COVID, she's like, I don't have a model. This is me. So this is Amy, who actually founded this company in California. And I don't know her. I've never spoken to her, but I feel like I do. And I definitely shop her site regularly. And it just struck me as like, here's someone who really understands email. And I don't know that she had any type of formal training, but it was just this ability to be very honest and sharing, this is my vision, and this is how I perceive how I'm going to benefit you. So she's curating choices that she thinks are high quality, sustainable, beautiful, worthwhile. And then she's arranging them in a way that's very visually pleasing. And she's also, being very helpful. So she can kind of recommend things that are good for you depending on, different aspects of your life. So this, to me, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that she's probably using one of the standard templates here because it looks similar to some of the ones that I see in the comment ESPs. And yet these are great emails. And it has a lot to do just with the sentiment and the thought that she put into the content. And again, the honesty and the directness. Subject lines I have to talk about because I always get asked about subject lines. So I'm going to give you the short. Tell, don't tease. The example I always like to use for this one is, let's say you got an email from a friend that was like, hey, what are you doing Saturday? Or great plan Saturday. And you respond or you open the email and you realize that she's actually asking you to move. Or she's trying to give you some of her old things, something like that. That happens all the time in email. And for a period of time, these trendy subject lines that were like, sneak peek inside or kind of teasing you to open, they did work to generate opens. They did not work to generate clicks. And over time, they actually led to disengagement. So I would very much prefer that you say, white paper inside, very, very simple. And of course on the topic. And it's great to use if you have brand names to use, if you have, names of relevant people or influencers or just names that are important to you within your industry. Proper nouns are very important. So tell, don't tease. There's no need to drive, falsely inflate your open rates. Unless you're a publisher and you're monetizing off the opens, but even then that's going to be a short-term result. It's not going to last because people are going to catch on to you. 2, going back to testing your theory. So if you're getting into testing your subject lines, start forming an opinion about the types of groups of people that are on your list, and then test into that to say, I think I have a group that's motivated by urgency, and I think that I have a group that's more of a research-oriented group that's going to take a little bit longer. And then test into that. And the way that you might do that is to split those 2 categories and then try each subject on each and see if you were right. See if the ones that you thought are more of a urgency-oriented segment based on past behavior and past emails they've opened respond better to the sort of the longer sell or the softer sell. And then start to follow those patterns. Now, here's a quick snapshot. I pulled my history again with Conifer. And I actually do this for the big brands and small brands where I'll go into the individual person and I'll look at their history and start to sort of understand what the responses are. When I was at J. Crew, we also spent a lot of time looking at this because there certainly were people that shopped full price for themselves, sale for their family, full price, for themselves, back and forth. So you would see other people that would never shop full price and other people that would never shop sale. And it's important to get to know your customer that way. Because again, to use that analogy of you have a really great relationship with a brand and you shop in there all the time and you're one of their better customers and you know the sales associate very well, and you walk in and you're willing to spend money on the new collection, and they grabbed your arm and drug you to the back of the store and said, well, here's all the clearance stuff that's not really selling, and this is what we'd like you to buy because we need to get rid of it. That's often the experience that people have with email. And that's where you start to compromise your brand and your relationship with your consumer. So on the other side of this, I looked at Conifer. This is a brand for me that's an influencer brand. I'm looking to this brand for new ideas, new visuals, to introduce me to new styles and trends that might be coming. So if you look at my clicks, so any of the subject lines here that are not bolded, those are the emails that I have previously read and responded to from this brand over several months. The capital new was a big one for me. So, and she did a great job of using adjectives as well. So new reversible gathered tops, new bright graphic scarves and cozy sweatshirts, new leather bags. The specificity for me was so helpful because I knew whether it was time for me. She actually sent an email recently on new socks. I do not need new socks, but I had to see what she was providing. And I could have probably gotten them at a better price somewhere else, but I still shop from her because of the fact that she introduced me to them. And I felt like being loyal to the brand for that reason. And then if you look at my behavior, I don't shop her sale as much because I know for this brand, she doesn't do a lot of sale, and so it's out of season. I'm trying to live with fewer things in my house, but I might have a different relationship with another brand. I can say there's certain larger brands that I shop for staples for. And so I'm definitely looking for the 40% off and I'm looking for the sale. And so if that brand were wise, they would only send me those emails and not those in between. And if Amy were to start looking at her targeting, probably a good bet for her to send me everything still, but she might focus on just sending a customer like me new because she knows that that's how I'm responding to her emails. And that's sort of the basis of beginning your segmentation. KPI consensus. When I'm talking to a big company and I ask, are you aligned internally on the metrics that matter? Of course, we're talking about departmental within an organization. But because we're talking to small business today, I think it stands as well. Like, are you aligned internally on the metrics that matter? Do the opens really matter? That is such an easy thing to get hung up on. And I want to talk to you about why it's important to move beyond them. Open rates are tremendously misleading, and they can lead to faulty business decisions. They have a tremendous amount to do with the quality of the data on your list. And you can manipulate the data to double and triple your open rates very quickly, but often means reducing the audience and improving your targeting that you're sending to. More so than ever, we're seeing that openers are not converters, or they're not the ones that are the most likely to convert. And so you end up starting to engage in keeping these people on your list that are interested in looking at your emails, but they're not interested in actually engaging with and purchasing your product or service. So big graph here, lots of different numbers, but I just want to talk you through it at a high level. On the left-hand side, I've created a case study. Let's say we had 10,000 people on our list, and we're doing what would be an ABC test of subject lines. The first one is the teaser, the one that you see from a lot of brands. It's going to get the most open rates. It might get 30% or higher open rate. But once they're inside, they're not necessarily pleased with the choices. And so you're going to get a lower click-through rate. You're going to get a lower conversion. And again, conversion is if they took the action, usually purchase that you wanted them to take. In this case, I calculated as a percent of clicks. And so at the end of the day, you got 6 conversions out of 10,000 people that you mailed, which translates to $600. Let's say that the sweater you're trying to sell is $100. In the second middle of the line, which is, we commonly see favorite fall sweaters on sale. You're doing a better job here, because at least you're going to get people opening your email that are interested in sweaters, that are interested in sale, and you're giving them the season at least, so they know it's not summer clearance that's coming out, in November. But so you're going to see a lower open rate. And so for many senders, if they compared these two subject lines, the response is, oh, well, fall sale is here is definitely better. But look further as you move over to the right, the click rate was higher because you had sweater people in there. The conversion rate was a lot higher. And so on that single email, you would have made $1,600 instead of $600. Taking it a step further as you get more advanced, and I often tell people this, as long as you have the stock, put the best products in your email. Don't use email as the tool. And I say this to big brands as well, and many of them are still doing it. They push the stuff that they need to get rid of. They push the things that didn't sell and didn't work out for them in email. Find another channel. You can move that stuff with a partner like Guilt or something like that. But don't necessarily abuse your email list by pushing your the sizes or styles or services that didn't necessarily work out for you repeatedly to people. So let's say in this instance that your Mary Jane cardigan, and I'm basing this off of a real cardigan story, but it was a different name, and specificity about the discount. 10% open rate seems really low. Like if your CMO was looking at this, or you're looking at this, you'd say, wow, that email really tanked. But if you keep moving, everyone that opened that email was probably familiar with that cardigan, or at least interested in a cardigan. So the click rate's way higher, the conversion rate's way higher, and you just improved your revenue off of one send from $600 to $2,400. Now, if you start to multiply that, let's say you mail weekly and you start using this strategy more frequently, and again, you're always going to have some awareness that people know what this product is. They've visited on their site, they put it in their cart, they've clicked on it, or they've shopped something similar before. You will really start to see the gains in revenue. And this is the strategy that I work with in a lot of different verticals, is starting to figure out what it is that your customers are specifically interested in, then serving them that content, and then focusing less on the open rate, more on the conversions. And just one additional follow-up to this, obviously, if you knew more specifics about what that person engaged on, you could get that open rate also up probably as high as 50% if you knew the specific, color, for example, that they had put in their cart or they liked. And that's when email programs really start to take off.
Nicole, I know we're tight on time, but you have some critical points to get through, like skills and some great examples from Mind Offline. So
yeah, let's jump ahead to those quickly. The deck will be distributed. So we talked here a little about email ownership and priorities, which I think this is self-explanatory enough that can be reviewed on your own. Data hygiene, just quickly, that is, again, drop the emails that aren't responding. That's what puts you in the spam folder. You become a bounce expert. Google what bounces are, understand a soft bounce and a hard bounce, and make sure you're watching those very closely as a KPI. And then just jumping, quickly into Mind Offline, as well as Gabrielle mentioned, I launched it during COVID. with 2 small children pulling on my leg. I had a very minimal budget because there was really no expectation of earning revenue on this business when it launched. It was just something I felt compelled that I needed to do. Honestly, I almost set it up as a nonprofit, but because of the restrictions in setting those up during COVID, I decided it was faster to set it up as a for-profit. And I would say it's generous to say I was a quarter of a person resource. And so this is the overall principle, is that free your hands and your mind will follow. This is one of the first ads that we ran, used a quote from someone that has credibility and has a true connection to the brand. But this was an ad that we were able to come up with very quickly because I had already created, or had created for me, in partnership, a visual toolkit. And this is sort of the brand identity. And this is what I would suggest you work on before you dig in too deeply into your email program, your site building, anything. So these are kind of the key components. You start with, identifying the logo and the stamp, and then you determine your palettes. In my case, I wanted to have a winter palette and a summer palette. So we worked through a lot of colors until we arrived at those. And then you sort of get these like mood pieces, which you'll see at the bottom, that could be backgrounds for Instagram posts, that type of thing. And then the graphic elements, which are on the right, which serve as inspiration for a lot of the other content that would be developed. And then the next step of that is to say, okay, so what would an Instagram feed look like? And again, I wish my Instagram feed still looked as clean and as beautiful as Maria, my designer, presented it as, but this is my goal. And this is what I can pull back to. And this is what allows me to sort of say, this is on brand, this is not on brand. And then if you look on the website on the right, I created this whole website myself, never having used Shopify before, but it was because she had already provided me all of these toolkits. I knew the color scheme, I knew the fonts, and I generally knew what the imagery was going to look like. And that made this far easier. I was able to really get this website up in less than a day with very limited resources. And it still has a lot of work. I still want to improve on it, but I think that's important to mention that because I had that toolkit, everything else was easier. Mind Offline's email is still very nascent. We've only sent out, I think, a total of 4 emails. The list size is just a couple hundred at this point. But I was able to build these emails in Shopify in literally like 3 minutes because it pulled the content from the site. The imagery was already there. They have incredible stock imagery that you can pull from. So if I didn't have, the right knitting kit or something that I was selling, I found some really great stuff in their content library. And because my list is so small and I know everyone that's on it, fortunately, our offerings have been selling out. We're not selling thousands and thousands, but to me, that feels like a success, and that's where I want to be. I'd rather have a small list that's really working than a very broad list. Yes, with that being said, I apologize, we are tight on time, but I wanted to extend also a code to anyone that's interested in getting, spending some time offline this holiday to use on the website. That's TV Holiday. And I hope to see you there, and I hope that I shared some information that will be helpful with you for your email programs today.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And I know I plan on painting pottery with my son over Thanksgiving, thanks to Mind Offline, and I can't wait to disconnect. So I hope everyone takes advantage of this special code. We have a few quick questions to get through that I think will hit on many different types of businesses. The first question is really the difference between a product business or a service business. I know you also offer workshops and different services, but do you feel like any of these key lessons vary if you're a product business or a service, or is it all applicable?
I think that the main difference that I see between product and service is the importance of the ability to segment early on for services is much more critical. Services in general, unless you're just selling one type of service or a subscription, you want to understand very quickly the nature of that customer. And I could use the example of Getty. Obviously, that's a big service company, but we immediately knew what the job function was that somebody had, and the email they got from day one was different if they were a creative or if they were the person that was making the financial decision. And so I think that when you're getting into product and retail, you can't be too specific up front because people gift and people do change their mind and they shop differently. But for services, knowing kind of where they are and being able to collect that data up front and then have the ability in your ESP to segment off of it, I think is more of a priority for services.
Got it. And I love that you say don't get too wrapped up in how big your list is, but what tips do you have for growing your list? Do you automate the process? What type of information should you be capturing? Do you capture first name or birthday? I know people are so resistant of sharing too much information, but what type of data do you think a business owner should be collecting?
That's a great question. I'm of the school of data minimalism. Part of that stems from the fact that I hate even saying this, but it scares people. You can get almost all of that data from third-party sources, and oftentimes it's relatively affordable to append it. So you can get quite a bit if you just have the email information, and you're going to have a much higher collection rate if you just ask for the email up front. And then you can do sort of that progressive profiling where then you offer them the opportunity to provide you with more information as the relationship builds, or on the next screen, even another pop-up on the next screen, and then they can choose to, but catch the email first. And then at least you know that you have the chance to re-engage with them. Most people stop engagement with your site and with your email because they get distracted. So the last thing you want to do is hold them up by collecting a lot of information. Your ESP can also pinpoint, in most cases, the geography of where they're opening your emails. You don't need to get the zip code necessarily from them. I would say that, again, if you're in services though, and it's very critical to know how far away someone is from, needing that service, or what type of service might be right to, or, what sales team to assign to them, then you may want to, take the effort to collect more information up front.
But the long story short is that there are a ton of hacks that you can pull data in different ways that won't intimidate or scare people off. And I know MailChimp, Mandrill, Emma, all of these providers have so many different video links to walk you through a lot of that. Let's quickly talk through content, because there are a number of questions about content. So as far as email length, so how long an email is, as well as the frequency of how often you send. It sounds like you've been very thoughtful in only sending a few emails out for your business. What do you generally recommend as far as frequency and also the length?
That's a great question. So length since COVID actually has reduced. So people used to have a higher tolerance for what we called commuter emails. So emails that would come out in the morning when maybe you're taking the train to work or riding the bus. That time has been taken away from many people. And when they have their few hours a day to work, they're going to work and they want a lot of efficiency. So the shorter, the better. Lately, if you have multiple great products, then you might want to consider either segmenting them based off the people that might like those products on past purchase or behavior, or sending out a couple emails. With regards to frequency, I do not advise necessarily a one size fits all for most companies. It's really easy to segment off of people that have received 3 emails, opened 1, received 3, opened 3, received 10, opened none. So I usually say let the engagement of the consumer guide the popularity or the frequency of the segmentation in which you're sending to them. That will also protect your deliverability as well, because one of the main things that is going to hurt your list is if you are repeatedly deploying to emails that aren't engaging with you. And that gets in data hygiene a little bit, that when you're trying to get through the spam filters of Gmail and the others, generally speaking, you don't want to mail to people that haven't engaged in 90 days or more. And it's always tricky around holiday because everyone's like, well, maybe they only shop once a year. So you can do that, but do it a little bit more slowly. But I would say there's always going to be people on your list that have an appetite to get an email every day, and those that don't. And the final note on that topic is the best frequency also is the one that you can support with quality content and still manage the rest of your business. So don't commit to a daily. That is really hard to do. Send what's reasonable for you. And that's part of why our strategy is so sparse right now.
In regards to subject lines, you said don't tease. And Antonella was asking about the title of the email, if you should be, it sounds like you're saying be as direct as possible. I know in marketing, we talk a lot about CTAs, call to action, and being very clear as to what your call to action is for the email. Do you have any other tips for title, or other folks were asking about if you should be linking every single photo to the product page, so it's like a clear experience? So any tips on title and linking?
Yeah, so title, again, title is where you can put a little bit more context around that, sort of like, think of a newspaper headline. That is the ideal subject line, unless you're talking about page 6. So you want it to be these are the facts. This is what happened. And if you want to know more about what I'm telling you, then come into this email, and it's giving you a chance to say yes or no. Give your customer that opportunity. Their time is precious. So if what's inside the email is images of a vacation to go to Italy, tell them that. Don't just say, dream vacations that you want to see. That's frustrating. Maybe you just went to Italy, or maybe you never want to go to Italy, or it's not in your budget. So those are the types of subject lines that I say are teasing, where it's just like they don't really tell you what it is, and they're like, come inside and check it out. It's kind of like that person you don't know that well that's like, hey, can we meet for coffee? I'm always like, tell me what it is that you want to meet for, and then I'll figure out the best time for me that works with my children and everything. And I think that we have to start thinking about the humans on the other end of the email. With regards to linking, that's a great question. Yes, link to the product page. That will absolutely improve your conversion. There's nothing more frustrating than someone actually wants to go see that product, and then you take them to a homepage and they have to look for it and they can't find it. I still see that a lot. And so yes, make the number of clicks and the path to the checkout as short and quick and easy as possible.
Okay, Nicole, our final few questions we're going to think of as a lightning round, because I know you have to pick up your girls as well.
I'm covered on that. So yeah, I'm not in a big hurry, but thank you.
So as far as making sure that your emails load properly, I know Lisa was asking specifically about video. Do you feel that video slows down loading? Should you avoid including it in email?
Yes.
I know we've seen issues with even photos loading and slowing down the process. So what tips do you have for loading?
Yeah, so a couple tips here. One, like the general best practice is, especially in Gmail, typically keeping it under 30 kilobytes, 30 KB for the entire size of the email. It's going to guarantee that you don't get that kind of ... where Gmail has started to clip emails, and then most people don't notice that and they don't load it. I don't recommend putting video in the email. Put an image with the play button of the video that links directly to that video. Put that in the email. If that's what video emails do really well, but don't put the video in the email. Ironically, that was like the first challenge I dealt with when I was brand new at Condé Nast years ago. And the truth is same now. So yes, the shorter the better. You want your images to be high enough resolution that they look good, but they don't need to be massive, because most people are looking at them on their mobile. So faster loading devices are key. Some of the ESPs are now giving you tips within. I've seen it with Sailthrough and some of the others where they will actually tell you that how quickly your email is going to load. There's also 2 third-party partners that some of them are built into the ESPs that I'm aware of. One's called Litmus, and the other is called Email on Acid, if you could believe it. But it's actually a great platform, and you can sign up for an account with them, and then you test into it, and it literally renders your email across like 90 different possible combinations of devices.
Wow.
And that is just an incredible tool to be able to use. So I would, rendering tool is a great add-on. So.
That's great. I'm seeing some smiley faces. Sylvia is asking specifically about the use of emojis in email titles. What's your take on that?
Yes, don't overdo it. Don't overdo it. That's as in life, as in texting as well. I think specifically with younger generations, emojis are very popular in email. There's actually a couple of the new email tools have like an email score right in the subject line creator. So again, I saw this in Sailthrough where I can enter it and it's going to give me a score like between 1 and 100 of how well I'll do, and adding an emoji usually increases it, and it's been pretty accurate. So emojis are okay to use in emails, but I would say like save it once or twice a month, not every email. And
great. I know.
Choose your emojis carefully.
We started using emojis in our email, and I love them, but I agree, don't overdo it. As far as talent, you hit upon the fact that you worked with a freelance graphic designer. You're really essentially doing it yourself. It's not like you have a large development team that's coding your emails. Do you have any other advice for finding the right talent when you're essentially bootstrapping and working with a small budget?
Yeah, one of the things too is depending on what your skill set is, there are oftentimes people that you can work out some type of a trade relationship with. So I've worked with designers that want help building their brand and building their email marketing. And so we do trade. And that's been an incredible way to work with really great talent that it's feels very fair. Other than that, I think looking for oftentimes freelancers that are moonlighting, and if someone is employed and has a busy day job and they have a little bit of extra time to help you, oftentimes they're bringing a more current and relevant skill set, and that can be helpful. And they're, they're going to be good at managing their time. And I found that that helps. I work with a lot of people that sort of moonlight and do extra work on the side. And then that the caliber of their work is already good enough to be at whatever company they're working at. And just also looking at their body of work and saying, like, this feels close to what I want my brand to look like. And, gauging early on if they're, when they send you that first draft. I think it's okay to wait to engage until they send you at least a little bit of a mood board, and to say, okay, I think we're getting to the right place, or we're not. In terms of other tips, I actually trained one of our babysitters HTML one time because I simply needed more volume. I had a really big holiday season, and I have a history of training people because at Condé Nast I built a team of many recent college graduates, and she did great. And she was actually sending out emails for a client for a period of time. So if it's something that you know how to do and you just don't have the bandwidth, consider taking a few hours to actually train somebody to help you that's interested in the experience, and that works out well.
I love that. Nicole, real quick, any ballpark budgets that people should be understanding? What does it take to launch an email program for their small business? Obviously, it will range dramatically, but you're paying for a graphic designer, you're paying for an email provider. What are other expenses or any ballpark numbers?
That's a great question. I think to get, if you're already in an e-commerce platform that offers email, that's a huge savings. It's going to depend on the size of your list. I believe for Shopify, for me, right now it's still free and it's based on my subscription. I can send up to 2,000 emails, which will probably be a while until I get there. And so I'll probably stick with that until I need to. I have another account for the plastic work that I do that, has several thousand emails in it. And every month it costs almost $200. And I don't actively send from it quite frequently. So I sometimes wonder if I chose the right platform. That one happens to be in MailChimp right now. And I'm not sure that without a clear return on revenue, it makes sense. So for the branding, I think it depends on where you're located in the country, certainly, because the work is most expensive in areas like LA and New York. But there's a lot of great people that work in other areas too. And so, the branding usually ranges anywhere from, $500 up to $5,000. So I went for a sort of a mix of trade and compensation. And so I was able to stay on the more affordable end for some of the initial work to do that. But you have to determine, how long you're going to stick with this brand. When I first did Fawn Group's branding, I think I spent close to $3,000, but I used that branding for 10 years. And I just recently updated it. By the time it was ready to be updated, it was ready. But if you divide that over the course of 10 years, it becomes very affordable. So I think you can get up and sending an email for, as low as like $49 a month in some of the platforms or less. And for most brands, that's probably sufficient. And, I can't stress this enough. If you focus on the great things about your brand and use email for that, it will be more lucrative for you too than using it as like a, pushing the things that aren't working as well.
So Tadana has a great question about automating email sequence for new customers when they opt into the email list. So that might be a welcome email, like a certain pattern that you would like the customer to experience. What are your thoughts on that?
Automations are a critical part of the transactional customer service experience. They can end up being very time consuming. I work with a client that again sells cars, and there's like 143 different combinations because, as you can imagine, when you're waiting for a car, pretty important. You can accomplish automations in most of the startup platforms. I would say that in that instance, there's a platform called Klaviyo that is sort of still in the affordable ballpark, but has really easy automation where my favorite type of automation is drag and drop, where you can actually see the module, connect it together with different little arrows, do testing in between. Sail Through and Iterable also have really great automation. Those two are going to be kind of in the next tier where you're going to be investing several $1,000s to work with them. But you can create these really complex scenarios that also involve offline. So then it gets really exciting because you can see, oh, they're not opening my email. I'm going to follow them around on Facebook with an ad for a few days until they come back to the email. But yes, automations for the welcome especially. And I think I don't have the greatest automation up for my brand right now, and it's like my next priority. It's really important to me after we open the store, of course, but the confirmation should come within the first 24 hours, ideally within the first couple hours. And if you can, and this is really important, put controls in place on your website to protect yourself from bots. So having a reCAPTCHA, as much as we don't like clicking the sidewalks and the crosswalks, and it really will protect your list and have good data on it. And tweaking and optimizing your automations is a huge way to gain revenue. And I can say, like, at companies like Getty Images, it ended up being almost 50% of my time, because we realized that how that onboarding experience went and the automations went dramatically impacted the lifetime value of the customer, because it's very much just like the first time you walk into a new store, that first impression you get.
Well, Nicole, I know we have to let you get to opening your store today. So thank you so much for this valuable insight. And I know folks were asking if you'll be able to rewatch this video. Yes, we will send the link later today, as well as Nicole's slides. As always, our videos are up on the Tory Burch Foundation YouTube channel as well. And I know everyone's going to want to follow you, Nicole. They can follow you on Instagram and LinkedIn, and mindoffline.org and mindoffline on Instagram. So thank you, Nicole.
Thank you so much, and congratulations to all of you.